A brilliant morning had begun, but for Cinderella, today was anything but a good day. She was being falsely accused by her boss. Someone had stolen her research results, and even worse, she had no evidence to prove they were hers. Li, standing nearby, only added fuel to the fire. That's right. Does anyone have proof? The boss shouted. Enough. Don't forget, when you were at your most desperate, this company was the one that took you in. Cinderella stood there in silence. So Lily really dared to be this brazen, because she had long since climbed her way up by relying on the boss. Clenching her fists in anger, she shot back. Fine. I quit. But don't think you'll get away with this. I'm going to report you. With that, she hugged the stack of documents in her arms and stormed out of the office, her eyes blazing with fury. The boss's expression darkened immediately, and he said coldly, "If she doesn't know what's good for her, then we can't let her stay." At that moment, Cinderella felt deep regret. She hadn't expected that trying to protect her own rights would bring retaliation so quickly. A car suddenly sped toward her without the slightest sign of braking. It slammed straight into Cinderella and sent her flying. The scattered documents were soaked in blood. In that instant, the only thought she managed to have was, if I get another chance, will I still have the courage to stand up again? In a modern Federation research institute, surrounded by advanced technology and data screens, a girl suddenly opened her eyes. What? I got hit by a car and I'm still alive? Where's this? She looked down at her hands in shock. From afar, a young man rushed over, grabbed her hand tightly, and shouted, "Cinderella!" Staying silent and pretending to be stupid won't solve anything. She stared blankly. Cinderella? You're calling me Cinderella? You're Heist. Heist shoved her angrily and yelled, "You already have everything. You might even become my wife in the future. But Linda has nothing. So to make it up to her, you have to give her your research results." At that moment, Cinderella finally realized that she had transmigrated into a book, into a sci-fi comic she had just read. Even after transmigrating, she still had to deal with having her research stolen. The only difference was that this time, it was her boyfriend Heist doing it, all to clear the way for his white moonlight, Linda. She curled her lips into a cold smile. Before I died, I was still wondering, if I had the chance to start over, could I stand up again? Memories from her past life came flooding back. The confrontation in the office, the betrayal, the fatal crash. Then Heist's words from just now resurfaced too. You already have everything, so you should give your research results to her, Cinderella. Dressed in a long white coat, Cinderella stepped forward and replied, "Now, I have my answer." Heist, standing in front of her, said, "If you'd done this from the start, we wouldn't have wasted each other's time." Suddenly, she grabbed his tie and pulled hard, smiling faintly. "You want me to hand over my research results to your ex?" Smack! A fiery slap rang out. "What gives you the nerve to say something like that?" Cinderella sneered and clapped her hands in mock admiration. "Work is miserable enough already, and now I'm supposed to put up with this too? Anyone who likes being pushed around can do it themselves. I won't." She touched the futuristic communication bracelet on her wrist and thought to herself, "It really does feel good to hit someone. But now that I've done it, I still need to think of a way out." Just then, Linda came running over from a distance. With tears streaming down her face, Linda cried, "Cinderella, if you have something to say, say it properly. Why did you hit him?" Cinderella simply crossed her arms and looked at her with eyes full of contempt. "What exactly are you acting for? Wasn't he slapped because of you?" Hiding behind Heist, Linda put on an aggrieved expression. "You misunderstood. I didn't." Heist immediately jumped in as the hero, pointing at Cinderella and shouting, "How did you become this vicious? How could someone like you ever be my wife?" Cinderella shrugged indifferently. "So being your wife means swallowing humiliation? Then forget it. Whoever wants that can have it." Then she gave a cold laugh and turned to leave, but Heist still refused to let it go. He stepped forward and said in a consoling tone, "Even if you're upset, there should be a limit. If you apologize now, I'll give you another chance. Otherwise, you won't be able to handle the consequences." Cinderella looked at him as if he were an idiot. "If you apologize to me, I might consider it." She clenched her fists and thought, "Why isn't he here yet? If this turns into a real fight, I definitely can't win." Speak of the devil, and he appears. A tall figure walked over and gently supported her. "Miss Cinderella, are you all right?" That handsome young man was Rest. She let out a small sigh of relief, her eyes lighting up. Rest, you finally came. Her expression practically spelled out the words love struck, while inside she was thinking, why on earth didn't the original heroine choose him? He's the perfect second male lead. She immediately recalled the plot. This was a tragic romance comic. The female scientist Cinderella and the Institute director Heist were childhood friends. She had believed that with his support, she would have the chance to continue her research and use its results to save the entire Federation. But then Heist's white moonlight, Linda, arrived at the Research Institute, and everything changed. In order to pave the way for Linda, Heist stole Cinderella's research results and gave them to her. Because Cinderella loved Heist too much, she endured it in silence. And so she failed to notice the one who quietly protected her all along, the second male lead, Rest. Heist kept deceiving Cinderella's feelings and using her. And in the end, he treated both her and Rest as stepping stones for his own rise. In the final outcome, Heist became the new leader of the Federation and lived happily with Linda. Cinderella and Rest, once they had outlived their usefulness, were caught in Heist's trap and died tragically, buried deep in space. Their bodies drifted endlessly through the void. Faced with such an ending, Cinderella, or rather, Wang Xiaojun now, in Cinderella's body, spoke up indignantly. No, I refuse to accept that. Rest simply placed a hand over his chest, bowed his head before her, and said, then your wish shall be my will. Cinderella's inner love-struck self immediately flared up. So handsome, so cool. Rest is unbelievably cool. That side of her instantly took over her thoughts, showering him with imaginary flowers. How could the original heroine not notice such a gorgeous man? She never should have stubbornly chased after that male lead. Rest stood coldly in front of her and said to Heist, you want to make a move against researcher Cinderella? Right here. Heist's face turned grim with anger as he shouted back, you're just a dismissed ship captain. What right do you have to interfere? Because I'm Cinderella's guard captain. Those words made Heist stiffen in alarm. Standing behind him, Cinderella's heart stirred. Who could bear to watch someone this beautiful die in sorrow, let alone someone she had fallen for at first sight? She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she reached out and took Rest's hand. In a serious voice, she said, you're not some dismissed ship captain. You're a hero who sacrificed himself for the Federation. Rest was slightly startled and turned to look at Cinderella. She was still holding his hand as she continued, this illness can be cured. One day, you'll return to that position. Rest fell silent for a moment before replying, Miss Cinderella, everyone knows that once someone is infected with that illness, it can never be completely cured. You don't need to comfort me like this. She looked straight into his eyes. Do you trust me? Behind them, Heist clapped and sneered. Wonderful. My girlfriend slaps me and then goes off to hold another man's hand so gently. Cinderella snapped, shut up. If you don't speak, no one will think you're mute. From this moment on, I'm not your girlfriend anymore. Rest, throw this eyesore out for me. Heist angrily rebuked her. How dare you? Don't forget, I'm the chairman of the Federation Council. At that moment, two other researchers gossiping in the corner whispered among themselves. What's going on? Lord Heist and Rest are confronting each other. The other one widened his eyes in shock. Rest would actually dare do that. Rest stood in front of Cinderella, but inwardly he was thinking, that's right, after all, Heist is the one Cinderella likes. He nervously glanced back at Cinderella, anxiety swelling inside him. If these were just words spoken in a fit of anger, what if she regretted it later? Standing behind him, Cinderella spoke up indignantly. She simply couldn't understand how Rest could tolerate such arrogance. But Rest's reply surprised her. He says he's your boyfriend. If I do this, then... Cinderella immediately shook her head like a rattle drum. Stop, stop, stop. Don't say something so horrifying. I have nothing to do with him anymore. She raised two fingers as if swearing an oath. She knew Rest might not believe her easily, but she wanted to prove she was sincere. Rest gently patted her head and said, all right, I believe you. I'm only worried that if I throw him out today, he'll target you later. Cinderella looked at Rest with sparkling eyes, thinking, I can't take this. How can someone be so gentle, always thinking of others like this? Standing behind them, Heist pointed furiously at the two of them and shouted, Cinderella, hand over the research results right now, or I'll revoke your research privileges. Cinderella clung tightly to Rest's arm and muttered inwardly, "See? How could I possibly like a petty man like him?" From outside, a crowd seemed to appear out of nowhere, all of them immediately criticizing Rest, calling him rude and useless for daring to offend Heist. One of them pointed at Rest and suspiciously asked why Cinderella was standing with someone like him. Heist gave a low, contemptuous smile and said, "Rest, did you hear that? This is what everyone thinks. Why get back? I'll sign the order to have you removed." Standing behind Rest, Cinderella sighed inwardly. Only now did she truly understand. Reading a comic could never compare to experiencing it for herself. You had to see it with your own eyes to fully understand Rest's situation. She realized that Rest, the man who had silently endured endless insults, had never once fought back. Deep inside him was always a dark shadow of inferiority and self-loathing. Rest knew full well that the heroine already had a boyfriend and that he could never confess. But his own circumstances created an even greater distance between them. Cinderella tried to reach out to him, but the space between them felt like an entire world apart. She withdrew her hand, her heart heavy. Even so, he had never once refused any difficult request she asked of him. What made her hesitate was her fear that she might not be able to give him the ending he deserved. Looking at Rest in pain, her eyes suddenly filled with tears. "So this is it. A perfect second male lead like Rest is even more pitiful than I thought." Cinderella gently placed a hand on Rest's solid back. Smiling brightly like a flower, she called his name. "Rest, even if everyone else looks down on you, I will always stand by your side." Then she stepped forward and questioned everyone, to Rest's astonishment. "Do you know why we're able to work here in peace, conducting experiments? It's because countless heroes like Rest fought bravely on the front lines to win that peace for us." Her imposing presence made everyone unconsciously take a step back. Pointing at Rest, Cinderella continued, "And the reason he's not still on the front lines now, isn't it because he was infected with a strange illness, left with after effects and forced to retire? And even so, he left quietly without a single word of complaint. The coldness and ingratitude of the people present disappointed her to the extreme. Is this how you treat a hero? It's enough to chill anyone's heart." The research room fell completely silent. Everyone stepped back and lowered their heads in shame. Even Heist's face darkened at Cinderella's words. As for Rest, he was so moved that he was speechless. He had never expected that one day he would hear words like these. Unconsciously, he called her name. "Cinderella," she angrily shouted. "Apologize to Rest." Everyone who had been cursing him moments ago immediately bowed their heads and apologized. Those who had called him trash now trembled as they admitted their fault, repeating their apologies with eyes full of panic and regret. Heist, somewhat uneasy, cut in. "Is that enough?" "Even so, Rest was still disrespectful to me. I have the right to deal with him." But Cinderella had already prepared for this. She took a sheet of paper from her pocket. It was a special order signed by the leader of the Federation. Cinderella continued explaining, "To protect the safety of researchers with outstanding contributions, the Guard unit has the right to handle emergencies, as long as it is reported afterward." She folded the paper in her hand. Then she smacked it against Rest and continued, "Right now, my safety is being threatened, so you have the right to act." Rest held the paper in his hand and smiled helplessly. "Miss Cinderella," he moved closer to her and whispered, "I've realized that compared to protecting you, I like being protected by you even more." Cinderella turned her face away shyly. "Say whatever you want, but why are you standing so close to me?" Meanwhile, her heart was racing wildly. A thought rang through her head. If he attacks with his looks, how is my poor little heart supposed to survive? Behind them, Heist angrily demanded, "Are you sure you want to protect this piece of trash? If you oppose me like this now, I won't forgive you." But this time Cinderella was no longer willing to endure it. She pointed at Heist and said, "Rest, what are you waiting for? If he manages to say one more word, that means you're not doing your job properly." Rest looked at Cinderella with his blue eyes full of affection and replied, "As you command." He immediately moved behind Heist and restrained his arm, making Heist cry out, "How dare you!" but Rest paid him no mind. He coldly tightened his grip around Heist's neck, leaned close to his ear, and said word by word in a threatening voice, "Miss Cinderella told you to be quiet. Didn't you hear her?" Linda, standing behind them, suddenly screamed, "Rebellion! This is all rebellion. What are you doing? Let Heist go." Rest did not even bother to look back. He only said coolly, "I'll escort Chairman Heist out." Cinderella cast a glance at Linda, her contempt completely undisguised. "Your acting is still a little weak." Linda clenched her hands and stammered, "Help. I don't know what you're talking about." Cinderella walked closer, each step piling more pressure onto Linda. She spoke in a threatening tone. "You should know that there's no wall in this world that the wind can't pass through." Before leaving, Cinderella threw out one final warning. "Whatever the two of you are plotting will come to light eventually." Then she said in disgust, "I'm not the person I used to be anymore. Learn to behave. Don't come bothering me again." Linda was horrified, thinking to herself, she knows everything. Once the two of them stepped out of the building, the open air eased the tension somewhat. Cinderella turned to Rest and asked about the after effects he was suffering from. Rest had always been the kind of man who hid his pain behind a gentle smile. He only shook his head to reassure her. "Don't worry. As long as I'm protecting you, there won't be any problem." Seeing Cinderella turn away, Rest softened his voice and coaxed, "I'm telling the truth. Please don't send me away." Hearing that, Cinderella turned back at once. "I won't send you away. Even if you wanted to leave, I wouldn't agree. I just want to understand your condition better." Rest raised a hand to his chin, thought for a moment, and then explained more specifically. "The after effects flare up when I'm piloting a warship, but when I'm on the ground, there's no problem." Cinderella remembered Rest's ending in the original story. In order to test the heroine's research results, he had been threatened and lured onto a warship by the male lead. Ignoring his worsening after effects, he stubbornly piloted it anyway. The experiment succeeded, but the price was his tragic death. The scene of Rest's miserable death surfaced in her mind. The saddest part was that from beginning to end, Cinderella in the original story had never known that Rest had paid for her with his life. All she cared about was helping Heist rise to the highest position. The image of the heroine from the story being locked inside a dark prison appeared in her mind again. If she wanted to change Rest's ending, then she first had to solve the greatest hidden danger of all, these after effects. Cinderella rubbed her forehead in thought. Then she turned to Rest and asked firmly, "If I said I could solve your after effects, would you agree to one request from me?" Rest stood before Cinderella and spoke gently while she stared at him blankly. "Even if I still don't understand what's happening, let alone one request." Rest looked down at her with eyes full of tenderness and affection. "You know, I can't refuse any request you make." Cinderella's eyes widened as she thought, with the second male lead's feelings for me, asking that really was unnecessary. Seeing that Rest already seemed soft-hearted toward her, Cinderella crooked a finger, beckoning him closer. Rest obediently stepped nearer. "So that means, in front of him, I can do whatever I want?" "Bend down a little. It's tiring always having to tilt my head up when I talk to you." Rest lowered himself until he was very close to Cinderella's beautiful face. She smiled softly and said in a gentle voice, "To help you deal with those after effects, I'll need some of your data too." He asked in confusion, "What data?" Resting her chin on her hand, Cinderella slowly looked him up and down. "For example, your chest, waist, and hips, things like that." Also, hearing such requests, Rest's face flushed red. He turned away awkwardly, yet still tried to indulge her. "Why, you don't need to say any more. I'll arrange to send it to you later." Cinderella paid no attention to his flustered reaction and continued listing the medical data she needed as if it were an extremely serious matter. Rest did not reply. Still embarrassed, he did not dare look at Cinderella again, which made her press him. "Rest, why is your face so red?" Realizing that her teasing had gone a little too far, Cinderella burst out laughing, carefree and bright. "You're so easy to tease." After that moment of joking around, she turned away and lightly stretched her body, trying to relax after a long, exhausting day. "I'm a little tired. Dealing with that scumbag really took a lot out of me." Only then did Rest speak up. "I also have one request." Cinderella stopped joking around and looked at Rest seriously. "Go on." Rest met her gaze directly. His expression became strangely calm. "You don't have to worry too much about me, miss. Even if it can't be cured, that's fine. After hearing Rest's request, Cinderella let out a weary sigh. A wave of heartache rose in her chest. From beginning to end, this man had never once thought about himself. Maybe she should give him more than just a promise. Cinderella stepped closer and placed a hand on his chest, as if passing her trust to him. Rest, you're overthinking this. You don't have any other choice. You have to trust me. By a nearby tree, Heist quietly hid in the shadows. His jealous gaze was fixed on the couple not far away. Every intimate gesture between them stabbed at his eyes, stirring up a furious storm in his heart. He clenched his fist and slammed it hard against the rough tree trunk, gritting his teeth as he cursed inwardly. Those pieces of trash actually dare join hands against me? Just wait. In her private office, Cinderella sat amid piles of documents, checking information while thinking things over. Eliminating the after effects left by contaminated matter was truly difficult. She lightly bit her pen, her hair a mess. But the original owner hadn't just been a simple weapons designer. She had once infiltrated battlefields just to obtain weapons data. She had also done some preliminary research on contaminated matter. As if she had just discovered something huge, Cinderella clapped her hands together in delight. If that contaminated object was treated like a weapon, then wouldn't those after effects be like residual flaws left behind in a weapon? And fixing flaws was exactly her specialty. She hurried to her desk in high spirits, tying on a headband with determination. Sometimes people just needed a little motivation to keep going. Cinderella switched on the computer, and Rest's handsome face appeared on the screen. Looking at a handsome guy really did improve work efficiency, didn't it? Rest stood downstairs outside Cinderella's apartment, quietly staring toward the building where the woman he loved lived. Late at night, and she was still working as hard for him. Rest paused for a moment in thought. Miss Cinderella, I once swore that I would pay any price for you. Rest gently rubbed his face, hiding the sorrow in his expression. I don't want my existence to bring you any danger or trouble. Inside her room, Cinderella stretched tiredly after hours of work. But in the end, she had found a few clues. She opened the window and saw the familiar white car parked below the awning, making her heart tremble slightly. He actually waited all night? She had truly never met such a stubborn fool before. The next morning, the sun was blazing. Cinderella came downstairs and ran into Rest. Good morning, Miss Cinderella. She circled around him playfully, like a curious little kitten. You came so early? Yes, I went to sleep early last night, so I came a little earlier today. She stepped closer and gently straightened Rest's collar. You touched trash and still didn't change your clothes? That intimate contact, together with her teasing words, made him blush sweetly. Seeing that adorable expression, Cinderella couldn't resist pinching Rest's cheek. I'm talking to you, my innocent little Rest. You don't even know how to lie. Without teasing him further, Cinderella walked to the other side of the car and opened the door while he was still dazed by what had just happened. Let's go. Today probably won't be peaceful. Rest gently rubbed his cheek, his face still red with embarrassment. Lowering his eyes, he muttered, Was Miss Cinderella teasing me just now? They headed together to a modern research institute. A group of researchers had gathered together, discussing what they were seeing. No way. Doesn't that mean no one could touch him now? Standing at the back and having her view completely blocked, Cinderella asked the people in front what was going on. They made way for her one by one so she could move forward. Once she reached the front, she saw what the researchers had been examining. Cinderella rubbed her chin thoughtfully. It was an investigation notice, pinning the outcome of the inquiry. Research on Project X-39 was to be suspended. Xiao Thursday, seeing this, walked over to Cinderella and leaned close to whisper in her ear. This is aimed at the project you're researching, right? Isn't that because of the person you messed with yesterday? Hearing that, Cinderella's expression hardened, irritation flashing across her face. So Heist wanted revenge? Then let's see who's afraid of whom. Heist had been standing behind them all along, observing Cinderella's team and the unreadable expression on her face. His own face darkened, and a smug smile spread clearly across it. You think you can fight me? Don't you know power is the strongest weapon of all? When Xiao Thursday anxiously asked Cinderella about the situation, her tone cautious and uneasy. Aren't you really in a hurry? Cinderella, despite the trouble she was facing, smiled brightly at her, showing little concern. I'm in a hurry, but I think someone else is even more anxious than I am. The moment she finished speaking, Heist walked over from behind. In an arrogant voice, he ordered, Cinderella, If you admit your mistake now and hand over your research results, I can still. Before he could finish, she burst out laughing in mockery. Where did this buzzing fly come from so early in the morning? Not wanting to waste more words on him, Cinderella turned and left decisively after that taunt, leaving Heist glaring after her as Xiao Thursday looked on. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Xiao Thursday hurriedly bowed to him and retreated as well. Running to catch up, she lowered her voice and urged, "Cinderella, maybe you should endure it a little." Before Xiao Thursday could finish, Cinderella cut her off. "You care about me that much?" The question left her confused. "Stop joking. This isn't something to joke about." In the office, Chelsea saw Cinderella and Xiao Thursday bantering and walked over to them. "If you have nothing to do, why don't you come help me check the data?" Cinderella looked at Chelsea warily, suspicion in her eyes after his offer. "Chelsea, aren't you afraid of getting dragged in my trouble? I need the data urgently. As for everything else, he doesn't dare do anything to me. Fine. But this time, you'll owe me one. Later on, you'll have to help me with an experiment too." "Sure." Listening to their conversation, Xiao Thursday smiled in relief. That really wasn't bad. Given Chelsea's status, even Heist would have a hard time messing with him. Elsewhere, Heist was raging furiously. He watched Cinderella and Chelsea discussing and calculating data enthusiastically, with no sign of easing up at all. Heist's mind darkened, his calculating eyes fixed on Cinderella as he thought to himself, "Looks like I really forced her to put on this whole act. I refuse to believe that project can't succeed without her." Linda came hurrying over to Heist, all clingy and fawning, her voice trembling with anxiety. "Heist, was it you who got Project X-39 suspended?" Heist replied with a frown. "If a pet doesn't listen, it needs to be disciplined." Annoyed, Linda lowered her voice and warned him, "Do you even realize our side is waiting for the data from X-39's experiment? You abandoned the research for too long. And to teach her a lesson, you actually used your own project?" The more Linda spoke, the paler Heist's face became. "You need to find a way to make Cinderella restore the project immediately." But he showed no agreement with her. "You want me to go beg her?" Dream on, Linda, still doing her best to persuade him to let go of the pointless grudge between him and Cinderella. Linda said, "Don't forget, if both of us want to move up, we need achievements from these projects." Heist turned away abruptly, ignoring her pleading words. "Cinderella's gotten too arrogant. Maybe it's because when the Silver Star Control System research ran into trouble before, she found the solution and got praise from the leader." Linda was drenched in cold sweat, desperately trying to persuade Heist to soften. "This Project X-39 belongs to us. Whether she gets credit or not, we can always find a reason to erase her name later. The key is that she has to keep participating." She knew that if she didn't change tactics with Heist and just kept trying to reason with him like this, it would get nowhere. Linda pressed her body closer to Heist, making him relax a little. "Heist, it's all for our future." Linda's honeyed words seemed to work. Heist lowered his eyes and showed signs of agreeing with her. "I know what to do now." Hearing that, Linda immediately brightened. She swayed a little and gently smoothed the lapel of his clothes. "That's right. You should go comfort her." Heist lowered his head, both hands resting on Linda's shoulders. "You won't get jealous, will you?" Linda blushed at the sweet words and looked shy. "As long as we can start again, I'm already very satisfied." Unable to hold back, Heist pulled Linda into an intimate embrace. Meanwhile, Cinderella sat in her office, focused on her laptop. She had long since witnessed everything happening between Heist and Linda through the lab's cameras. If she had known, she wouldn't have checked the surveillance footage. She snapped the laptop shut and raised a hand to rub her eyes irritably. If not, her eyes wouldn't be burning like this. Watching it with her own eyes was even more stimulating than reading comics. Cinderella slumped over the desk in dismay. "Oh, Cinderella, Cinderella, the green on top of your head is way too bright." Chelsea, who had been standing quietly all this time, finally spoke. "You look like that because something went wrong with the experiment?" Cinderella didn't answer. Instead, she handed Chelsea a set of data sheets, with the part that needed checking already marked. "There really is one wrong figure. I've marked it. Take a look." Chelsea took the draft, reading and studying it at the same time. "As expected of you." After checking the incorrect data, Chelsea offered to walk Cinderella out. "It's late. I'll take you downstairs." As they walked, Cinderella kept discussing the project. "Based on your side's progress, there's still enough time. You have to be extra careful." On the way down to the main lobby, they suddenly ran into Heist, who blocked their path. Cinderella, no matter how I think about it, we don't need to make things this hostile. She didn't spare him a glance and only turned to Chelsea with a mocking smile. Did you hear a dog barking? Chelsea replied with an utterly serious face, though the meaning of his words matched it not at all. More precisely, dogs are not allowed in the research institute. Attacked by both of them at once, Heist trembled with anger. Why you? Chelsea still ignored his presence and called after Cinderella. By the way, are you free? Let's discuss the Silver Star defense system a little. Cinderella likewise ignored Heist and chatted with Chelsea as naturally as ever. Thanks for the offer, but I still have documents to review. Seeing that, Chelsea replied cheerfully, if you need anything, call me. In the main courtyard of the Research Institute, Heist hurried after Cinderella and pressed her. Since when were you so close to the director's son? Cinderella kept walking without even turning back to look at him. Even if he's just the director's son, doesn't he have a name? As expected, all you ever notice is status. Deeply displeased, Cinderella answered coldly, leaving Heist pale-faced. And one more thing, don't ask about my private life. Heist scratched at himself awkwardly, putting on a repentant act to curry favor. This morning I was just too angry. I've already restored your research authority. He tried hard to seem sincere, but Cinderella only found it ridiculous. I admit I was too soft-hearted. I wanted to help Linda establish herself sooner, but that's only because I value loyalty and affection. In response to Heist's pleading attitude, she merely answered him with cold contempt. So what? Heist gave a sly smile, trying to charm Cinderella and win her over. His hand slowly rose, intending to stroke her hair. But Cinderella had already seen through his tricks. So you should feel lucky. You're the first one I thought of. Otherwise, why would I come to you for help instead of finding someone else? She looked at him in disdain, thinking why? Isn't it because the heroine is a love-struck fool? Cinderella gave him no chance to keep performing. She turned away indifferently. If that's the case, then I suppose I should thank you for paying attention to me. Seeing that he hadn't really won her over yet, Heist shamelessly kept begging. Stop making trouble, Cinderella. It's been 2 days and you're still sulking. If this keeps up, we won't be able to keep dating. Cinderella smacked Heist's hand away hard when he tried to touch her. Get lost. She straightened up, looking down at Heist with proud disdain, as if he were an ant. Take a good look. Right now, you're the one who needs me. Is this your attitude when asking for help? Heist grimaced at that, his irritation showing plainly. My patience has limits too. Seeing that he had finally dropped the act, Cinderella crossed her arms and mocked him gleefully. Oh, you gave up on pretending that quickly. Heist said in a harsh voice, come to my office. We'll close the door and talk properly. A flicker of excitement passed through her eyes when she heard his proposal. Sure, you set yourself. We'll talk behind closed doors. Cinderella now looked like a cute but scheming little devil. There were no cameras in his office. If a fight broke out, who would hit whom was still up in the air. At that moment, a voice rang out and shattered the atmosphere, making Cinderella jump. Miss Cinderella, your precious hands are for experiments. Cinderella turned toward the voice and met Rest's gentle gaze. You finish your checkup? Ignoring Heist's presence completely, Cinderella fussed over Rest bit by bit. She took his hands and rubbed them, making him so shy he couldn't react. Where's the needle mark? Did getting blood drawn hurt? Let me see. Cinderella gasped softly as she touched Rest's hands. These muscles, this feeling, drool-worthy. Rest blushed and coughed lightly, which finally made Cinderella notice. The atmosphere between them was so romantic that everyone around them turned to look. Heist stood there looking extremely displeased, about to interrupt. Even so, neither Rest nor Cinderella paid him any attention. Who checks a needle mark from a blood draw? She laughed and explained, because I care about you too much. 2 staff members passing by looked awkward because of the atmosphere. Their eyes reddened as they were forced to consume the dog food of this ambiguously flirtatious pair. Unable to bear being shut out any longer, Heist spoke up in frustration. A second ago you were mocking me, and now you're acting coy with another man. Cinderella, do you still not understand your own position? Hearing the anger in his voice, Cinderella turned and shot him a sidelong glance. You're angry? Don't you know what you're doing? Seizing the opportunity, Cinderella threw herself into Rest's arms and hugged him tightly, acting spoiled. So scary. He's angry. Is he going to hit me? Seeing that, Rest hugged her back while Heist's face turned green with rage, unable to make sense of what had just happened. In Rest's embrace, Cinderella turned and looked at him smugly. Wait, was the person just now and the person now really the same woman? Ignoring Heist completely, Rest lowered his head and looked at Cinderella with affection. His deep, warm voice rose like summer sunlight to comfort her. Don't worry, I'll protect you. As long as I'm here, no one can hurt you. After looking at Cinderella tenderly, Rest lifted his eyes to stare at Heist with murderous intensity, his warning unmistakable. Please stay away from Miss Cinderella. Hearing that reminder, Heist was so shocked he nearly got a nosebleed. Cinderella smugly turned back and stuck out her tongue at him in ridicule, while Rest continued his stern warning. Otherwise, I won't keep holding back. Heist was furious after being force-fed such a mountain of dog food and thought bitterly, am I just a part of your little play? Dizzy with rage, he quickly forced himself to recover his composure. Fine, very fine. Cinderella and Rest simply turned and left hand in hand, ignoring the reeling Heist behind them. Both of them chatted and laughed, enjoying their own private atmosphere. Let's go eat. We can wait for your health check report at the same time. They went into a nearby Chinese restaurant. Rest and Cinderella sat facing each other in the elegant surroundings. Only then did Rest finally let out a breath, dropping the act and speaking softly to her. Some of your colleagues passed by earlier. We probably need to keep a little more distance. After all, I now. Cinderella cut him off, her alluring lips moving gently. Rest, I have a secret I've never told anyone. She looked away, avoiding his eyes. I'm sick. Every word made his eyes widen in alarm. Rest stared straight at Cinderella in shock. Sick? Let me help you schedule a doctor. He stood up and moved closer to her, worry filling his face. You need another checkup. As if not wanting him to worry, Cinderella took Rest's hand and replied, No need. I know what illness I have. With a choked-up expression that made her look pitiful beyond compare, she held tightly to his arm and said sadly, This illness can't be cured. Then Cinderella tugged Rest down to sit beside her. Come a little closer. I don't want anyone else to hear. The distance between them grew smaller and smaller. Cinderella raised her slender hands to cover the movement of her lips, then whispered, Actually, I have a condition where I like touching people. On the surface, she looked miserable, so pitiful that no one could resist. But inside, she was so delighted she wanted to jump up and down. In situations like this, she could just make things up on the spot. Cinderella became rather pleased with the plan she had just carried out. If Rest lacked a sense of security and was afraid of dragging her down, then she would simply keep him locked by her side. Rest, meanwhile, was utterly horrified. His face went pale, cold sweat breaking out, as if he couldn't believe what he had heard. I've never heard of this kind of illness before. Is it dangerous? She took his hand and explained calmly, Because I was hurt before, I have a severe lack of security. I need physical contact with you. Hearing that, Rest immediately thought of her awful ex-boyfriend. It was because of Heist, wasn't it? Cinderella reached for her handbag and searched for something inside. I admit it, what happened earlier was on purpose, because I saw she took out the image of Heist and his white moonlight, Linda, embracing each other intimately. I really can't accept it. When Rest saw the photo she showed him, he could not hide his shock. His handsome face tightened, his brows drawing together. He seemed to be angry. This is too much. Last time I went too easy on him. Cinderella's eyes brimmed with tears when she heard that, but inwardly, she was overjoyed. Heist. Oh, Heist. Even trash like you still has some use. She put on an innocent expression, looking fragile and pitiful, as if she had been deeply wronged. Do you still want to stay away from me now? Seeing that, he raised his hand and gently patted her head to comfort her. With that handsome face of his, he said softly, I'm glad I can make you feel safe. Seeing that he had taken the bait, she hesitated. But she kept stirring the coffee in her hand, thinking nonstop. Although Rest had softened toward her, trying to win in one move was still impossible. The mission was too difficult. Still, this counted as a good start. Rest was holding his coffee cup. The moment he heard that, he grew shy. His face flushed red like a little puppy. I'm fine with that, if it's for treatment. Cinderella smiled radiantly and held out her hand. Let's pinky swear. You're not allowed to keep bringing up that whole keeping our distance thing anymore. Rest reached out and agreed to her request. Scene change to the hospital. The silver-haired doctor sitting across from Cinderella and Rest said, "Rest, your test results are back." Inside your body, he suddenly stopped, his expression turning grave as he looked at the two of them. "We are obligated to keep things confidential. What is your relationship with this young lady?" Cinderella immediately seized the chance and raised her hand. "I'm his family." As soon as she said that, his whole face turned red as a tomato, and he stole a glance to the side. She can hear it. Only after hearing Rest's confirmation did the doctor relax and smile. "Family is good. Family is good. You've always come to your checkups alone. I was worried there was no one to take care of you." Cinderella patted her chest a few times, her face full of confidence. "Don't worry. I'll take very good care of Rest." The doctor began reading Rest's medical file. "The contamination levels in your body are very strange. Normally, with numbers like this, you should already be in a coma." He pointed at the file suspiciously. "But you're still extremely lucid. My guess is that while you were being contaminated, you also absorbed some kind of antibody." The doctor pushed up his glasses and kept making guesses. "We don't know what this antibody is, but we can't filter it out of your body. We can't destroy the balance." In the end, he concluded, "In short, what we lack is research material." Cinderella lowered her head, as if she understood his meaning. "I understand. We need to find a way to obtain research material of the same kind." The doctor looked puzzled. "Over the past few years, the Weapons Institute has already analyzed everything related to the battlefield. Are you insisting on researching that contaminated specimen?" Then he looked at Rest with regret. That child Rest has already suffered so much. He finally got close to achieving his dream, and then this happened. Really, Cinderella did not care how difficult this was. Her eyes were full of hope. "I already have a lead. Don't worry, I'll do everything I can." Scene change to a black car speeding down the road at a reckless pace. Inside the car were Cinderella and Rest. She stretched her hand out the window to catch the cool breeze and said excitedly, "Rest, you were right. Driving around and feeling the wind really does feel way better." She was thrilled inside as well, taking the chance to get familiar with this new place. Rest, who was driving, felt happy seeing her so cheerful. His perfectly handsome face turned toward her, and he smiled lightly. "How about one more trick? Hold on tight." As soon as he said that, he stepped on the gas. The car shot forward, startling Cinderella into a frightened scream. In the rearview mirror, a white car suddenly appeared, closely tailing them as if issuing a challenge. Inside the car, Rest's expression became guarded when he saw it. Noticing that, Cinderella turned toward him and asked, "What's wrong?" By then the car had caught up to them and was driving right beside them. And it wasn't just one car, but three. Cinderella and Rest had fallen into a pincer trap. "They're targeting us." His face turned serious as he gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Cinderella, if you're scared, just close your eyes." As soon as he said that, he slammed on the brakes. Their car stopped abruptly and crashed straight into the car behind them. The other driver lost control and swerved into the white car beside it, creating a deafening crash. Under the impact, the white car was flung into the air. Holding the steering wheel steady, Rest turned the car and drove straight toward the white cars. He and Cinderella escaped the life-or-death situation in spectacular fashion. Cinderella stuck her head out to look at the scene and could not help sighing in amazement. Watching something this fast and intense really is exciting. As she turned back inside, looking dizzy, that stunt just now had clearly left her a little lightheaded. Watching it was thrilling, but actually experiencing it made her want to forget it. Rest suddenly slammed on the brakes again. Before she could react, Cinderella was thrown backward hard into the seat. She turned to Rest with an angry face and shouted, "What the hell is it this time?" In front of them were three young men who looked like rich young heirs living a life of luxury. They blocked the road without the slightest hesitation. The blonde among them stepped forward and knocked on the car window. "Dear cousin, you really are hard to invite. I had no choice but to come myself." His face was full of arrogance as he looked at Cinderella. "This young lady seems to have an unusual relationship with you. Aren't you going to introduce her?" Rest unfastened his seatbelt and prepared to get out, not forgetting to tell her, "Stay in the car and don't come down." Only then did Cinderella remember that the young man from before was Reno. She remembered that in the comic, he looked a lot like Rest. Rest stepped out and grabbed Reno by the collar. Seeing Rest react like that, Reno looked delighted. "Oh, getting physical already? Are you angry?" While clutching his collar, Rest shot back. "You need to understand. I don't want to see you because you're troublesome, not because I'm afraid of you. Suddenly, Reno stopped looking at him and turned his gaze elsewhere, wearing a vile expression. Rest followed his line of sight. It was Cinderella. She had gotten out of the car and was walking toward them. If you keep holding him like that, how are we supposed to talk? Let him go. Hearing her say that, Rest let him go, though he still clearly wanted nothing to do with him. I have nothing to say to him. Reno leaned against the car behind him and said mockingly, "This is rare. It's the first time I've seen my cousin listen so obediently." He stretched out a hand toward them and bluntly made a proposal. "I'll skip the nonsense. I know where to find what you need. Do you dare come?" Cinderella and Rest stood there, staring directly at Reno's group. After a moment, she spoke suspiciously. "How do I know you're not trying to trick us?" She looked at Reno, who was standing there with his arms crossed, full of smug pride in his proposal. Inwardly, she thought this wasn't in the original story. Looks like my coming here has changed the plot. Her eyes betrayed her tension. If I remember right, this Reno guy really hates Rest. Reno suddenly burst into laughter. "You'd give up the research material right in front of you just because you're scared?" he said in disappointment. "So the mighty warship commander is only this much, after all." He shook his head and spread his hands, not even bothering to look at Rest or Cinderella's expressions, clearly implying he was taking back the offer. Looks like the rumors were wrong. Seeing that, Rest immediately stepped in front of Cinderella and retorted to Reno. "You've been jealous of me since we were young, and after my parents' accident, you only grew more resentful because my parents dragged your family into it." At Rest's words, Cinderella could not help being surprised. "Wait, this isn't right. His parents are his biggest taboo, but he can talk about them so calmly in front of me?" She covered her mouth and laughed softly. "You really trust me that much? How am I supposed to repay that?" Rest remained tense as he directly confronted Reno. "I just have my checkup results. Your side already knows about them, don't you? Do you think I can trust you?" The two men following Reno became furious at Rest's questioning and were ready to start arguing. One challenged him. "What did you just say?" The other threatened, "Watch your mouth, you piece of trash." Seeing that, Reno kicked one of his own lackeys without hesitation. "Get out of the way. Can't you see I'm talking? Why are you blocking me?" Looking at the scene in front of her, Cinderella could not help thinking of the plot. If the plot really could change. Focusing on the situation, she came to a conclusion. Then I can't tell what Reno's attitude really means. Reno waved a hand and explained his decision regarding Rest. "Cousin, I'm just concerned about you. That's all." Then he continued his earlier proposal. "So, will you accept my invitation?" Faced with such an important choice, Rest glanced at Cinderella, cautiously considering how to answer Reno. If it were only me, it'd be one thing. But Cinderella would definitely risk herself because of me. He looked at Reno with a cold expression. "I can't trust you." Hearing Rest's answer, Reno sighed. Then there's nothing more to say. Having made up her mind, Cinderella could not let this opportunity slip away. She quickly called out to Reno, "Wait." Her eyes full of confidence, she said firmly, "Who says we don't agree? Why don't you wait until other people finish talking?" Reno was speechless, completely stunned by Cinderella's answer. For a moment, he was like a statue, unable to move. And it wasn't just Reno. Rest was equally shaken by her words and hurriedly tried to persuade her to give up that decision. But Cinderella did not waver in the slightest. She looked confident, as if she already knew the future. She replied to Rest without any hesitation. "Is he more dangerous than a battlefield? Don't forget, both you and I have been at war." Hearing that, Reno raised his brows. "You really aren't like what my investigation said." Cinderella crossed her arms, fully revealing her imposing presence. "What did your investigation say?" She clicked her tongue. "I'm a love-struck idiot?" She looked at him disdainfully. "If you really believe that, you wouldn't have come to us." Reno smiled and could not help nodding at what he had just seen. "Looks like my dear cousin has better taste this time." She replied to his praise politely. "I'm glad you think so too." And she got straight to the point. "Tell me, where's the research material?" As she spoke, she stepped closer to Reno, as if trying to overwhelm him with sheer presence. "It's definitely not on the battlefield. If it were, your information wouldn't be worth anything." Reno revealed the true nature of a dangerous man. He smiled slyly. "Of course." Then he pulled a mysterious black invitation card from his clothes and handed it to Cinderella. "I can share the information freely enough. That is, if you can survive long enough to get it." After leaving, Rest drove while glancing at Cinderella, who was carefully reading the contents of the mysterious card. He offered, I can go alone. You shouldn't go. Cinderella rejected his losing proposition outright. No, I've never even been to an auction before. I want to go. After saying that, she continued reading. Hanobo's auction. Time, 1 week later. Note, each invitation allows one guest. Rest was determined not to let Cinderella throw herself into danger. He said, if you want to go, I can take you to some other auction. But the Hanobo's auction isn't like that. Hearing this, Cinderella turned toward him and asked softly, what's different about it? Rest explained, because the Hanobo's auction is an underground auction. They even auction off human bodies. It's extremely dangerous. After learning the nature of this auction, Cinderella looked back down at the invitation. So Rest quickly cut in. One hand stayed on the wheel while the other reached toward her, trying to take the invitation from her. So give me the invitation. I'll go by myself. She refused, adamant about not letting him do as he pleased. That means Reno might not be lying to us. I still want to go. Suddenly, the car speeding down the road came to an abrupt stop. Rest raised his voice. Cinderella. His unusual tone surprised even her. Oh, you're not calling me Miss Cinderella anymore? He broke into a sweat, realizing he had just raised his voice at her. Rest hurried to soften his tone. This isn't the time to joke around. Cinderella answered seriously. Do I look like I'm joking? She knew how worried he was for her, so she quickly tried to soothe him. I've always cared about things concerning you. You worry about me, and I worry about you too. Cinderella looked at him gently, trying to calm him. Do you want me to worry? At her gentle touch, Rest could not help growing shy. Suddenly, the atmosphere between them was shattered by the sound of a ringing alert. Cinderella returned to her seat and glared irritably at her communication bracelet before connecting the call. I don't care who it is, but this better be urgent. From inside the bracelet came Heist's angry voice. Cinderella, why didn't you come to work? Where the hell did you run off to? Cinderella sighed, forced to answer. Heist, wasn't my project suspended? Where I go is my business. On the other end of the call, Heist said, didn't I say I'd restore your research authority? Hurry up and catch up with the progress. Cinderella let out a mocking smile. So if you say suspend, it's suspended. And if you say restore, it's restored? Hearing that, he softened his tone and asked cautiously, then what do you want? Cinderella did not hesitate to repeat what she had told him before. Didn't I already say it? If you want to beg me, then beg properly. On the other end, he snapped, Cinderella, don't push your luck. After hearing that, she promptly ended the call with that unreasonable man, then explained to Rest, who was looking puzzled. It's nothing. Just a harassment call. Don't mind him. Rest did not accept that explanation. I heard you call him Heist. She replied with a tone like she was playing with words. Exactly because it was Heist, it counts as a harassment call. Rest turned away sadly, no longer keeping his eyes on Cinderella. You weren't like this before. You wouldn't have spoken to him like that. He looked dejected, like a puppy abandoned by its owner. And you also wouldn't. Seeing that he did not look happy, Cinderella quickly unfastened her seatbelt and leaned toward Rest. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't care about you like this? To avoid contact with the Cinderella who was taking the initiative, Rest tried to lean back. But despite all his efforts, she pressed him down and placed a hand on his chest, saying softly, Rest. Why aren't you listening carefully to what I'm saying anymore? Cinderella leaned over him, pinning him beneath her, making him panic and stammer, I am. The luxury car sped down the road, accompanied by the wild pounding of Rest's heart. He stammered, but Rest lowered his head, gloomy and conflicted. But I can't just accept your kindness without giving anything in return. Cinderella held his hand to comfort him, while inwardly cursing in frustration. That damn politeness. In her heart, anger flared as she shouted inwardly, I don't even need anything from you. So why do you keep agonizing over this? Rest looked at Cinderella, full of worry. So Miss Cinderella really is starting to dislike me? But this body of mine, this identity of mine too, they're both nothing but trouble. Rest lifted a hand as if to touch Cinderella, thinking, until I resolve all of that, no matter what I say, I can't be sure I'll be able to keep my word. Still worried, Rest withdrew his hand. But I, Cinderella said sadly, forget it. I already knew that from the beginning. I'll accept all of it. Rest looked somewhat flustered by her words. Rest's hand shook violently, making Cinderella ask anxiously, Rest, what's wrong? What do you mean, forget it? Is there something about me you're unhappy with? He wrapped an arm around Cinderella's waist and pulled her into an embrace. Rest hugging Cinderella made her blush with embarrassment, and she hurried to explain, Rest, That's not what I meant. Rest's face was red too as he asked, Miss Cinderella, do you think I can really get better? Hearing that, she smiled brightly and comforted him. Of course you can. Then let's make a promise, okay? Cinderella asked in surprise. What kind of promise? Rest said seriously, if my body gets better, I'll tell you a secret. Cinderella's whole face lit up with excitement. Here it comes, here it comes. Rest is finally about to confess to me. In her mind, she was dancing in celebration. This is great. I finally made this blockhead understand how I feel. She took Rest's hand and promised, don't worry. Even if I have to die trying, I'll cure you, Rest. Avoiding his gaze, he said quietly, don't say things like that. Out of everything I want, what I want most is for you to be safe and happy. Hearing that, she fell silent. Once again, she realized it. Rest is not just someone on the pages of story. Rest is a real person. Rest gently stroked Cinderella's hair, softly comforting her. No matter when it is, I hope you'll always put your own safety first. He held her shoulders and advised, so about the auction. Cinderella smiled gently and said, Rest, you always think you're dragging me down. But the truth is, no one has ever put me first the way you do. Cinderella pushed open the car door and stepped out, saying to Rest, you're still worried about my safety, right? Follow me. Inside the luxurious house, Cinderella said, Welcome. You're the first person to ever see my training room. Warm lights illuminated the space around them. What immediately caught both their eyes was a crudely drawn portrait of a man on the wall. Rest looked surprised. I only thought you were exceptionally intelligent. Cinderella picked up a dart, aimed, and confidently continued. You didn't think I was skilled in both brains and brawn too, right? The dart struck the picture right in the forehead. Rest was momentarily speechless. Cinderella dusted off her hands and said, Well, do you still want to test my abilities? See whether I'm qualified to attend the auction? Rest sighed helplessly. Miss Cinderella, you really are. Cinderella happily moved closer and asked, So what is it? Rest awkwardly thought she was truly adorable. The atmosphere stirred up Cinderella's competitive spirit. Come on, then. Let's see how strong I am. She swung at him, startling Rest. A moment later, Cinderella complained, Oh no, I'm a little dizzy. Rest caught her, apologetic. I didn't control my strength well. Again, I'm not done yet. Full of confusion, she thought. I trained in martial arts before, so how could I fail to withstand even one move from Rest? She regretted it a little. This was way too embarrassing. Rest said worriedly, How about we stop? Cinderella attacked again and shouted, Stop wasting words. Keep going. But before she could do anything, Rest immediately grabbed her arm. Cinderella was pinned within Rest's embrace. Rest hastily explained in alarm. Sorry, it was just instinctive reflex. I know. She silently comforted herself. This is a future comic book world. It's very different from my own world. The standard of strength isn't the same either. I hurt you. That was my fault. Cinderella drooped and sighed. I originally wanted to show you a bit of what I could do. And now look at this. Rest patted her shoulder to comfort her. I've trained in combat since I was born. Later, even joined the fleet. Fighting someone like me is an everyday matter. He pinched Cinderella's cheek indulgently. You picked the wrong opponent. My combat ability is among the very best in the Federation. Cinderella said awkwardly, Right, I forgot about that. Rest looked away, thoughtful. He stepped closer and said gently, But you really did remind me of something. You do need the ability to protect yourself at the auction. Looking at the portrait on the wall, now riddled with darts, Rest suggested, You can use this weapon to help yourself. Hearing that, Cinderella felt a little restless and asked, You mean these darts? She picked one up, her voice full of suspicion and poorly hidden irritation. Other than stabbing that bastard in the face, what use could this possibly have? Rest quickly took the dart from her hand. Be careful. You might hurt yourself. Cinderella blushed. Isn't that different from how he usually talks? Rest pointed toward the door and said, My subordinate will bring some documents over in a bit. I asked him to deliver them. Cinderella didn't understand and asked, Bring what? Instead of answering directly, Rest only said mysteriously, You'll know soon enough. He rolled up his sleeves and enthusiastically asked Cinderella, By the way, do you want something to eat? I'll make it for you. Rest skillfully sliced potatoes. 2 dishes were cooking at the same time on the stove, filling the air with delicious aromas. Wearing an apron, Rest cooked with practiced ease. He looked incredibly attractive. Sitting to one side with her chin propped on her hand, Cinderella sighed in admiration. A man who knows how to cook really is charming. Rest paused and leaned toward her. What did you just say? Cinderella cheerfully repeated herself. I said you look very charming cooking for me. The moment Rest heard that, his face turned bright red in embarrassment. Just then, the doorbell rang. Flustered, Rest hurried off to answer the door. Cinderella anxiously reminded him, You haven't taken off your apron yet. But Rest didn't hear her and opened the door. Bruno stood there, staring in shock at the pink apron. Rest's image in his heart shattered instantly. Stunned beyond belief, he gaped and said, Boss, why are you actually washing your hands and cooking now? Didn't you say a man's hands are meant to protect the nation? Only then did Rest remember he was still wearing the apron, and his expression froze in horror. Bruno regained his composure and lowered his voice, still teasing Rest. Don't tell me you found someone new and gotten yourself kept? Speechless, Rest crossed his arms and said darkly, Cut the nonsense. Did you bring the documents? Seeing that, Bruno turned serious. They're all in here. Rest reached out to take them and asked, Did everything go smoothly? Did anyone make things difficult for you? Bruno gave a cold snort. Those ungrateful people saw that you were injured and forced into hiding, and every last one of them disappeared. Then, as if he had noticed something, he pointed behind Rest, his face going pale with fear. Cinderella walked over and greeted him warmly. Hello there, Bruno asked in disbelief. Are you the one keeping my boss? Looking at her, beautiful like a porcelain doll, he sincerely praised her. Cinderella didn't deny his words. She calmly admitted, Thank you for the compliment. If you want to think of it that way, it's not exactly wrong. Bruno awkwardly scratched his head and said, It's fine if he finds other work, but what if that scientist finds out? If he does this, could he get fired? Rest angrily smacked Bruno on the head and said, There's no could. She is that scientist. Cinderella forced an awkward smile beside them. Bruno still looked dissatisfied. Even so, you don't need to come to her house in person and take care of her all the way into the kitchen, do you? Don't tell me in the future you'll even. But before he could finish, Rest shoved him toward the door and drove him out. That's enough. You can leave now. After closing the door, Rest gently explained, That's my vice captain. His personality isn't bad. He just talks too much and doesn't know when to stop. Then he added worriedly, If he bothered you, no, Cinderella said. He didn't bother me. In fact, I even think. She paused for a moment, then smiled at Rest and continued. I really like hearing what he says. Embarrassed, Rest turned away with a flushed face. Let's eat first. We still have things to discuss later. Cinderella answered with a soft, The two of them went into the study together. Rest set the bag on the table. I asked Bruno to gather some information on the Hanobo's auction. As he opened the case, he explained, Besides that, I also prepared a weapon for you. This is something my father left me. Cinderella looked at the finely engraved golden bracelet and asked, You're saying this is a weapon? It looks no different from an ordinary piece of jewelry. Leaning closer with excitement, she said, Come on, let's try it. Cinderella picked up the bracelet and inspected it carefully. Rest reminded her anxiously, Be careful. Don't touch things randomly. This is a transforming crossbow. When my father was young, he got the inspiration from an ancient book. The crudely drawn portrait was pinned up on the target board. Rest continued his careful explanation. One bracelet holds 5 arrows. He loaded the bracelet, then handed it to Cinderella. Their hands brushed against each other. He added, If it isn't opened, it's just an ornament. No one will be able to tell. He leaned close, took Cinderella's hand, and aimed for her. It works best for sneak attacks because no one can guard against it. An arrow shot out from the golden bracelet. It flew forward and lodged precisely in the center of the portrait's forehead. Rest emphasized again, It's most effective for a surprise attack because it's impossible to defend against. Holding the bracelet, Cinderella sank into thought. Isn't this just like the hidden weapons from my previous world? She thought in surprise. I never expected to see something like this in this story. Worried, she asked Rest, You said this was left behind by your father. Wouldn't it be a waste to give it to me? Rest answered shyly, It would only be a waste if you didn't use it. He looked at her intently and said in a firm voice, If my father knew, he'd be happy too. Cinderella felt secretly delighted. Could this be one of those heirlooms passed down by parents for a son to give his future wife, like in every story? She suddenly patted him on the shoulder and promised, "Don't worry, I've accepted your token of love, so I'll definitely protect you well." Her sudden action threw Rest into a panic. In high spirits, Cinderella stared at him, at a loss for words. He said, "You're going to protect me?" Only then did Cinderella turn away shyly and mumble an explanation. "I mean, we'll protect each other." Rest coughed lightly, then changed the subject. "But right now, we need to hurry and investigate the Hinobo's auction first." Cinderella moved closer again. She took his hand, looked up at him, and said, "Wait a second. You didn't deny that it was a token of love, did you?" Rest turned away, his face tinged red. "It's an important item, so it should be given to an important person." Cinderella let out a relieved sigh. She comforted herself. At least he didn't deny it outright. That counts as progress. She placed her hand on Rest's shoulder, stopping him as she teased. "That answer still isn't enough. I'm not satisfied yet." Rest, not understanding, grew even more flustered and asked anxiously, "Then what would make you satisfied? As long as it's something I can do, except. He trailed off, unable to finish. Seeing him panic, Cinderella reached up and poked his cheek. As she touched him, she said, "Like this. This feels great." Rest's face flushed red with embarrassment. Cinderella eagerly said, "All right, let's move on to the next activity." Cheerfully, she gestured, "Let's go." Rest spread a map out on the table and pointed as he explained, "This is part of the interior map of the auction house. The exits are here." He also carefully added, "Besides that, everyone attending the Hinobo's auction disguises themselves to some extent." Cinderella asked in confusion, "So other people won't recognize them?" "It's because the owner of the auction house, the image of a man in a hat, his features obscured, came to mind. Every time he appears, he takes on a different appearance. No one knows his age or his gender. People only know that the owner's surname is Ha." Rest continued cautiously. "To some extent, he controls a great many underground trading markets. Everyone wants to get close to him." Cinderella smiled faintly and asked, "Because he likes disguises, the guests who go there also have to disguise themselves?" Rest frowned slightly as he thought. Everyone assumes that's the reason, so disguising oneself has quietly become an unspoken basic rule. Cinderella suddenly turned to Rest with a grin. "Sounds like you think otherwise." Rest carefully voiced his thoughts. It might just be that he enjoys teasing people and watching them embarrass themselves. Cinderella thought uneasily. The story never mentioned this boss, Ha. Maybe this is part of a hidden plot line. She gloomily speculated. Judging from Rest's expression, he probably knows this person. Seeing Rest stare darkly at the photo, she couldn't help feeling suspicious. Then why doesn't he want to talk much about this? Cinderella silently lamented. "Rest, you really do have a lot of secrets." Discouraged, she slumped across the table. Seeing this, Rest asked worriedly, "Cinderella, are you all right?" Raising her hand weakly, Cinderella said, "I'm fine. Help me up." Rest didn't refuse. He pulled Cinderella up with force, and she fell into his arms from the momentum. Cinderella pulled back and rubbed her nose. "It's all your fault. Why did you use so much strength? Your chest is way too firm." Seeing that she was hurt, Rest panicked. Holding Cinderella's hand, he said, "Sorry. I have to train regularly to maintain my physical condition." Cinderella smiled meaningfully. "I wasn't blaming you, but Rest." She moved close to him, her voice full of teasing. "You apologize at the slightest thing. Do you really not understand romance at all?" This, Rest blushed and turned away shyly to hide it. Then he hurriedly said, "It's getting late. I should go. I still have to come pick you up tomorrow morning." "Stay here tonight," Cinderella said. "The guest room is on the right." "All right, Miss Cinderella." A moment later, Rest was so nervous that he walked straight into a wall. Embarrassed, he rubbed his nose and said, "Good night. See you tomorrow." Cinderella sighed emotionally. A handsome, innocent man like that, and the heroine still let him slip away. She really wasn't ordinary levels of blind. The next morning, the sun was already high in the sky, its light shining brilliantly through the treetops. When the doorbell rang, Cinderella stretched lazily and asked, "Who is it?" She went to open the door, only to find Hai standing outside, smugly winking as he said, "Other than me, who else would bring you breakfast this early?" Her face went blank with speechlessness. "Did you take the wrong medicine or something? I don't believe you suddenly became kind-hearted." Heist acted as if he hadn't heard the sarcasm, lifting the bag of food enthusiastically. "I bought all your favorite things." Cinderella let out a cold snort and mocked him. "You're saying these are all my favorites?" Heist replied confidently, "What Aren't you touched? As long as you come back, I can. Before he could finish, Cinderella cut him off. Heist, stop doing pointless things. These are all foods Linda likes. You even used to buy them for her before. Her tone was dripping with sarcasm. What? Did you buy breakfast for both of us and accidentally bring me the wrong one? Just then, Rest walked out from inside the house and quietly asked, Cinderella, what's going on? Heist jumped in shock and blurted out, Rest? Why are you here? Then he loudly demanded of Cinderella, You two were together last night? Cinderella sighed helplessly. Oh no, I forgot about that too. Pressing her lips together, she cautiously asked, If I said we were together last night because of work, would you believe me? Cinderella, don't forget, we haven't broken up yet. Cinderella replied coldly, If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have forgotten. Thinking it over carefully, Cinderella remembered that in the story, the heroine had broken up with Heist once before. But because there was a problem with the experiment results, Heist had coaxed her into getting back together. She calculated carefully. It wasn't coaxing, it was emotional manipulation that succeeded. She looked back at Rest and continued thinking. After that, Cinderella was still ignored, used, and turned into a stepping stone for them. Cinderella reached out, intending to close the door. Seriously, we've broken up. You already have your white moonlight, so stop bothering me. Heist looked utterly disbelieving. Furious, he shouted, You're saying that right now? In front of this weakling, you want to break up with me? Hearing that, Cinderella stopped mid-motion. She spoke up in denial. He's not a weakling. He's the strongest captain in the Federation. Heist, unwilling to accept that, turned green with anger and sneered, A crippled captain forced out of service who can now only work as a bodyguard. He mocked her. You're breaking up with me for this piece of trash? Weren't you always disgusted by me anyway? Now I'm making things easy for you and Linda. So why are you still angry? Heist froze for a moment and asked himself, That's right. Why am I angry? He comforted himself inwardly. I'm definitely angry because she dares to say she's breaking up with me. Seeing the situation turn bad, Rest stepped in front of Cinderella and warned, Heist, please keep a safe distance from the scientist. Heist took a step back and cursed, You rude bastard. Cinderella looked surprised, then took Rest's hand and pulled him back. Heist raised his voice threateningly. Cinderella, have you thought this through? A little scientist with no power or influence like you. Without my help, you couldn't even protect your own experimental project. He boasted arrogantly. Do you really want to lose someone as reliable as me? Once again, Rest stepped in front of Cinderella, making her stare in surprise. Rest moved closer to Heist and said, Cinderella is not some little scientist. She is someone capable of repairing the Silver Star defense system, a senior scientist personally praised by the leader himself. Cinderella happily praised Rest in her heart. Even though he isn't good with words, he's still saying things to defend me. Heist shoved Rest with one hand, his tone still provocative. So what? Who here isn't a senior scientist? I'm also the chairman of this Federation conference. I have plenty of ways to interfere with your results. Furious, Rest grabbed Heist by the collar and lifted him up. Do you even know what you're saying? Rest warned coldly. Cinderella's research project concerns national defense, the military, and even countless soldiers on the front lines. Heist pried Rest's hand off and said, National defense and the military can't be affected by one person alone. I think you should understand that better than anyone, Rest. Those words visibly unsettled Rest. Heist pointed at him again and sneered. Without you, your legion is doing just fine too, isn't it? Cinderella held her head and sighed. I almost forgot the later part of the story involved war too. Romance matters, but so does career. She stepped between the two men and separated them. Enough. Stop talking. She comforted Rest at her side. Don't worry. No one can steal my project. Cinderella then turned to Heist and tried to smooth things over. The main phase of Project X-39 is about to enter its most critical stage. Let each of us give a little. Heist moved close and ground out through clenched teeth. Are you that sure I need these research results? Otherwise, don't you want a promotion? Heist relaxed and stepped back, his tone softening. Fine, fine, fine. If you're going to use that to threaten me, then I have nothing more to say. He pointed at Rest and threatened angrily. But today, he was rude to me. Sooner or later, I'll make him pay for it all. After saying that, he stormed off in fury. Cinderella picked up Heist's bag of food and threw it straight into the nearby trash can without a trace of guilt. All right, the nuisance is dealt with. Let's hurry and have breakfast, then head to the institute. Then, in a low and gentle voice, Cinderella reassured him, "Don't worry. You're my guard captain. He can't do anything to you." But Rest said worriedly, "It's not that I'm afraid of him suppressing me. Your situation at the institute is really that difficult. So why?" Cinderella pressed Rest down into a chair and explained, "I'm the chief designer and principal architect of the defense system. As long as I have this, the director will protect me too." Rest asked again, his voice carrying a trace of worry and barely hidden curiosity. "You mean the director? I heard he's always strict and conservative. He doesn't get close to the other scientists." Cinderella said smugly. "That's why his son, Chelsea, showed me goodwill." A confident smile spread across her face. As she opened the refrigerator, she explained to Rest, "If Heist wants a promotion, he has to take the director's position. Do you think the director would just sit back and allow that?" Cinderella carried over a tray of tea and pastries and set it down in front of Rest. "But don't worry about me. Try the bread I made. It's my favorite." But Rest still looked troubled, lowering his head to stare at the food. Pained, he said, "Why don't you take better care of yourself?" Cinderella replied innocently while eating, "That's why you have to take good care of me." "Okay, Captain Guard." Rest picked up his teacup thoughtfully and took a sip. Setting it down, he said with certainty, "Do you know, Cinderella? I'm willing to give even my life for you." Rest courteously opened the car door for Cinderella. She winked at him playfully, hinting, "Remember to wait for me after work. We're going to the clothing store together." Then she added, "Come with me to pick up a few reports first. The director sent me a new report." Teased by her, Rest swallowed hard and said shyly, "All right, let's go together." Cinderella walked ahead, with Rest following her into the building. Heist silently watched the two of them and sneered. How disgraceful! While he was lost in thought, a knock sounded at the door and a young woman walked in naturally. Thinking it was his secretary, Heist immediately ordered in a stern voice, "Notify everyone. Their words and actions must be proper. Personal relationships are strictly forbidden from interfering with work." The girl who had just entered froze and asked in disbelief, "What?" Hearing the familiar voice, Heist jolted and turned around. Seeing that it was Linda, Heist hurriedly embraced her and soothed her. Cinderella agreed to come back and continue the research. Linda looked suspicious. "You didn't promise her anything, did you?" Feeling guilty, Heist avoided Linda's gaze and said no. She's just a useful tool. Linda sensed something was wrong and grew uneasy. Was she imagining it? Lately, Heist seemed to be paying far too much attention to Cinderella. Cinderella and Rest were walking down the wide corridor, chatting in perfect harmony, when Linda suddenly appeared and blocked their path. Raising her voice, she said, "Cinderella, do you have a moment to talk in private?" Seeing this, Rest politely said, "Then I'll go on ahead." Cinderella pulled him back and said helplessly, "You don't need to avoid this. If there's something to say, just say it." Linda probed into the relationship between the two of them, putting on an innocent look as she glanced at them both. Cinderella hadn't expected her to ask about that. She was a little stunned, but still answered, "If that's what you want to ask, then go ask Heist." Linda's eyes brimmed with tears as she hurriedly put on a wronged expression. No. Why are you getting angry so easily? I only came to apologize to you." Cinderella frowned. "Apologize for what?" Lowering her head pitifully, Linda spoke in a soft and fragile voice. "The misunderstanding between us before was all my fault. Please don't let it affect the progress of the research." Watching this little performance in front of her, Cinderella felt disdainful. The green tea act was overwhelming. Since hard tactics hadn't worked, now she was pretending to be soft. Cinderella stepped closer, startling Linda so badly that she retreated 2 steps. Fearfully, Linda asked, "W, what do you want?" Cinderella remained calm, utterly unconcerned. "The research will proceed as usual. As for your apology," she placed a hand on Linda's shoulder and refused her outright. "I don't accept it." Leaning close, she whispered a warning to Linda. "If you have even a little observational skill, then stop bothering me." Just then Heist arrived, saw the scene, and shouted, "Cinderella, what are you doing?" Behind her, Rest strode forward forcefully to protect Cinderella. In a cold voice, he warned, "Watch your tone." Linda pretended to be pitiful and stepped forward to explain in an even voice, "Don't misunderstand, you too. I was only apologizing to Cinderella." Cinderella was speechless at the sight. She waved her hand dismissively. "This act again? Can you stop already?" Cinderella reminded both Linda and Heist once more. "Listen carefully. Stop bothering me. I won't cause trouble for you either." She crossed her arms and looked calmly at the panic on their faces. "Otherwise, I'll broadcast your little play on the community channel." At that moment, images appeared on the watches worn by Heist and Linda, showing the two of them embracing intimately. The two of them were so shocked they couldn't speak. Stammering, Heist said, "Cinderella." Cinderella turned away, ignoring his murderous stare, and calmly added, "I'm using this to make sure you stay away from me." "Is that so?" he called after her, his voice hoarse. "Is it because of this that you want to—" Before he could finish, Cinderella turned back and cut him off. Indifferently, she said, "It's not just this, of course, but you can think whatever you want." Linda glared hatefully at Cinderella as she left with Rest, her eyes filled with fury and resentment. Heist stepped forward and instructed her, "For the time being, behave yourself. Don't touch her." Suppressing her murderous expression, Linda immediately resumed her aggrieved act, using a divisive tone. "Don't you feel that Cinderella has changed a lot lately?" Hearing that, Heist stiffened. "She really is getting a little out of control. This can't continue." At that moment, Rest and Cinderella were standing in front of an elegant building. Cinderella introduced it cheerfully. "We're here. This is the place." Rest looked at the sexy bunny outfit displayed in the window and fell silent. Then his gaze shifted to a cat-eared outfit. Rest grew flustered. When he noticed an elf costume, he was so startled that his words came out all jumbled. Pointing awkwardly, Rest asked, "Why you want to buy clothes here?" Seeing his embarrassment, Cinderella burst out laughing. Teasing him, she said, "It's very famous, Captain Guard Rest. Don't tell me you've never seen this kind of thing before." He shook his head shyly, not daring to look her in the eyes. "No, it's not that. I have seen them before." Rest glanced back at the mannequins. They really were far too bold, and he couldn't hide his embarrassment. Cinderella mocked him. "Oh, really?" Flustered, he could only turn his face away, his cheeks reddening. Bowing his head, he said, "It's true. I was often forced to see this kind of thing before." Rest lowered his face, not daring to meet her eyes, while she deliberately bent down to get a look at his expression. Then she hugged his arm eagerly and said, "Since you've seen them so often, then please help me choose 2 suitable outfits." Feeling her suddenly cling to his arm, he couldn't help thinking to himself, "Miss Cinderella is holding my arm." At that moment, a voice rang out. It seemed to be one of the store employees. "What a handsome man and beautiful woman. Welcome. Couples get a discount if they shop here together." Hearing that, Rest hurried to deny it. "We're not." Before he could finish, the click of a camera rang out. He instantly turned toward the sound. Hearing him say that, Cinderella said regretfully, "A fake couple is still a kind of couple." Seeing him keep staring out through the glass door, she tugged at him and asked, "Rest, what are you looking at?" Outside, it was strangely quiet. Rest kept peering outside for a long while, but still saw nothing except silence. Turning back inside, he said to her, "It's nothing. I think I saw wrong." After escaping Rest's suspicion, a man hiding behind the bushes was revealed to have been taking sneak photos. He thought to himself, "Almost got caught, but this is a huge win." That look in their eyes was so full of emotion. At the clothing store, she linked arms with him as they walked in. Before them stood a sales assistant wearing an extremely seductive bunny outfit. Around them were all sorts of other costumes in different styles and designs. After looking around, Cinderella was full of admiration. "There are actually this many styles." The saleswoman asked, "May I ask what occasion you want to wear them for? Public or private?" Hearing that, Cinderella eagerly asked, "What kind are the private ones?" "If it's for private use, then you'll need to go into another room to ensure privacy. Only the 2 of you will be allowed to choose, and no one will disturb you." "That sounds good." "Then I should." Before Cinderella could finish, Rest suddenly raised his hand and pressed her arm down. Blushing, he turned his face away and said to her, "We can just choose here in the showroom." As he spoke, his hand kept pressing her arm down. She looked at him in confusion. "Why? We're going to an auction, so shouldn't we be even more discreet?" Seeing her innocently ask the reason, he shyly covered his face and answered, the kind of private she means. And the kind you're thinking of aren't the same. Those are the ones with very little fabric. After hearing his explanation, her face turned as red as a tomato, and she stammered, "I didn't mean that." He said to the employee, "We'll choose by ourselves." After hearing that, the saleswoman politely bowed and left. Cinderella turned aside awkwardly, inwardly thinking, "This is so embarrassing. How could private mean that?" To ease the awkward atmosphere, she suddenly came up with an idea and said to him, "How about this? Let's each pick clothes for the other person. We'll meet in the fitting room in 30 minutes. Before he could react, she said it and ran off, leaving him behind. Watching her retreating figure, he smiled faintly. Miss Cinderella is really too adorable. At that moment, Manson suddenly appeared behind him. She asked, "Hey, Kid Rest, why did you come to my store?" It was a rare sight. Ignoring her question, he said, "Auntie, just pretend you didn't see me." Just as he was about to leave, she hooked his clothes with the cane in her hand and stopped him. "Wait a second. Who said you could leave?" He turned back and said irritably, "Please stop joking around with me." She beat him repeatedly with her cane and shouted, "Didn't I tell you to call me Big Sister?" He turned around and tidied his clothes. Hearing her mention it, he said, "I have to attend the Hinobo's auction. And you didn't tell me sooner? Do you have an invitation?" He exhaled and answered, "My situation is a bit complicated. I didn't want to cause you trouble." She shrugged and mocked him. "Afraid of causing trouble? Yet you're not afraid of troubling someone else's daughter." He pretended nothing was wrong and answered seriously, "It's not what you think." At that moment, she took out a key and handed it to him. "Fine, no one can cause trouble for me anyway. What's there to see outside? Go into my private wardrobe and pick something." Holding the key, he asked awkwardly, "But everything in there is one of your specially designed outfits." She turned back and replied, "Exactly. Since this is the first time you brought a girl here, at least have the sense to choose something beautiful for her." Cinderella was inside, choosing clothes, when she suddenly heard arguing. It was the voices of several men shouting loudly, "Pervert! Can't you watch where you're going? You can bump into people just walking normally." The commotion caught her attention, and she looked over to see what was happening. Manson was being loudly insulted by a few young men. "An old woman your age should stay at home. Why are you trying to imitate young people? Maybe I should help make you really blind." Saying that, one of them raised his hand as if to hit her. Unable to ignore such injustice, Cinderella ran over and shouted, "What are you doing? Stop!" She rushed over and knocked his punch aside. The fury on her face startled him. He looked at her with some apprehension. Manson, meanwhile, was rather surprised by Cinderella's appearance. Cinderella's face darkened as she shouted at him, "You lay hands on someone weaker than you? Aren't you ashamed?" Hearing Cinderella describe her that way, Manson gave a faint laugh. "Weak? Interesting. So that's the kind of person she thinks I am?" Cinderella, who didn't know Manson's identity, calmly reassured her. "This lady, or gentleman, please don't be afraid, and don't feel self-conscious either." The young man, annoyed that she had interfered, immediately acted like a thug. Rolling up his sleeves, he shouted, "Got nothing better to do than meddle in other people's business? I'll deal with you too." At that moment, Manson's people were about to approach and handle him, but she stopped them. She waved a hand to signal them not to act yet. Though surprised, they stepped back as she wished. Cinderella looked at the thug, who didn't know his place, and said contemptuously, "Oh, you're going to deal with me too." She reached into her pocket as though to take something out. "Candy? That's all it was? You want me to forgive you? A few pieces of candy won't be enough." Cinderella gave a cold laugh. "These are given to me by someone very special. You think you deserve them too." Then she aimed at him and threw the candies decisively. They struck him squarely in the forehead. All he could do was clutch his forehead in pain. "Well, do you still like it?" The bystanders who witnessed the scene whispered mockingly, "That man is so weak. He got hit by candy hard enough that he can't even move. With ability like that, what could he ever accomplish?" I'm dying of laughter. Watching Cinderella's actions, Manson thought with interest, interesting. Now thoroughly humiliated in front of everyone, the young man could no longer endure it and roared, "I only let it slide because you're a woman." Then he stepped forward, about to throw a punch at her. Cinderella frowned in annoyance. "Is that so? But I don't feel like going easy on you." As she spoke, she threw another candy at him. Once again, he was hit by her candy bullet. Judging from his expression, those tiny candies seemed surprisingly powerful. He collapsed to the ground and wailed, "Help! Murder! Wasn't this what you asked for? You said you wanted my candy." Glowering, he shouted at the employee, "Are you just standing there enjoying the show? Hurry up and arrest this assailant." But the employee only replied calmly, "Sir, loud noise and disturbances are prohibited inside the store." He immediately jumped up and demanded, "What do you mean by that? Hitting people is allowed, but raising your voice isn't? Whose rule is that?" At that moment, Manson spoke up. "Mine." As of now, the saleswoman turned to her and bowed. "Boss." Hearing that, the man was terrified. Stammering, he said, "Why you? You're the owner here." Trembling, he looked up at her. "I heard the owner of Manson's shop is incredibly ruthless, a very formidable figure. How could you?" Manson couldn't stand looking at him anymore. She ordered, "Take him away. He's too noisy." As he was dragged off, he struggled in vain. Cinderella smiled awkwardly and said to her, "Looks like I really was meddling." Manson looked amused and said to her, "You really are an interesting girl." Then she pointed toward a door leading to another room and said, "Go on. Rest is waiting for you on the other side." "How do you know he's waiting for me over there?" She fell into thought. It seemed the plot was drifting off course. More and more unfamiliar characters were appearing, and this woman in the dark cloak seemed to know rest. Turning away, Manson said to her, "Cinderella, we'll meet again very soon." At that moment, a saleswoman came over, bowed, and said, "Please allow me to lead the way, miss." As she approached the door, Cinderella asked in confusion. This door was opened by... The door was pushed open by a hand. It was Rest. He appeared wearing a half mask and an outfit that made him look extraordinarily dashing. Cinderella couldn't help gasping at his appearance. "Oh my God, I think I've seen an angel." Seeing her stare at him in a daze, he extended his hand and asked, "Cinderella, what's wrong?" She placed her hand in his and said, "I think my old illness is acting up again." Her eyes still couldn't leave him. Puzzled, he asked, "Are you feeling unwell somewhere?" "Sorry, I got held up just now and couldn't come here immediately." Blushing, she raised her head and waved her hand. It's fine. I understand. I'm just a little not used to it." He looked at her in confusion, while she shyly clutched his clothes and thought to herself, "Definitely. Cinderella in the story had something wrong with her eyes. Luckily, I don't." At that moment, he suddenly remembered something and asked, "Did your touch insensitivity syndrome flare up again? Hurry and stay close to me." Just as she turned her head, he pressed his hand to her cheek, leaned close, and asked, "Is this okay?" She closed her eyes and thought, "Rest, do you have no idea how lethal you are?" At that moment, the sneak photographer appeared again, and the sound of a camera shutter rang out once more. In a loud voice, he shouted, "Who's there?" Cinderella turned to look, while his hand still held her. Outside the door, everything remained quiet and nothing appeared. Suddenly, he put a hand on her shoulder. Before she understood what was happening, he had already picked her up and stepped back. At that moment, the saleswoman appeared and said, "Sir, please don't be nervous. In Manson's store, no danger is ever allowed to occur." He turned to question her. "Someone was just assaulting people, and now someone is taking sneak photos. You know as well that without the boss's permission, none of that would be possible." He stared at her for a long moment. She looked up happily and said, "Miss Cinderella, the boss said she likes you very much. In any shop under her name, you may choose whatever you like." She placed a hand over her chest and bowed. "Then I won't disturb you any further." Rest and Cinderella stood there blankly, silently watching the saleswoman leave. Cinderella pushed him and said, "Put me down first." "So she was testing me earlier." He looked at her and replied, "You don't need to worry about her. That's just how she is. No one can guess what she's thinking. But that's good too. At least it can guarantee your safety at the auction." Hearing him say that, she could not help but fall into thought. Guarantee her safety at the auction. The clothing store. What exactly was the relationship between that woman and Boss Ha? In the research room, Xiao Thursday said excitedly, "As expected of my ship, they really are a perfect match." As she ran, she continued, "Judging by the time, Cinderella and Rest should have arrived by now, right?" At that moment, Heist appeared again. She collided with him, and the water in his cup splashed out. His face immediately darkened, and with a sharp, angry gaze, he said to Xiao Thursday, "How many times have I told you? In the research room, you need to be more careful. seeing the oppressive aura coming off him. She became very frightened and quickly lowered her head to apologize. "Sorry, Chairman. I was in a rush. If I'm any later, I won't make it in time." He immediately asked, "Make it in time for what?" She instantly turned around and left. He looked after her in confusion and thought to himself, "I'd like to see what exactly you're up to, being so mysterious." "Ah, Rest and Cinderella." She shrugged and said to him, "Oh dear, looks like we'll have to work all day today." He turned his head and looked around, then said to her with a shifting gaze, "Then give me a little time." She looked at him, not understanding what he meant. He suddenly took her hand and awkwardly asked, "Do you feel a little better now?" She responded shyly, This condition of mine has really troubled you too much." "It's no trouble. As long as I can help you, that's enough." He gently stroked her hand and said softly, "I'm going back to make some preparations. We have to go to the auction tomorrow." Xiao Thursday and Hai saw that whole scene, but their feelings were completely opposite. Xiao Thursday was extremely excited and said, "What's so great about watching videos? Watching it live is way better." Heist, on the other hand, was displeased. Hearing Xiao Thursday mention videos, he looked grave and asked her what video. "Xiao Tu Jumpet in Shop." "Chairman, why are you secretly following me?" Their commotion alerted Rest and Cinderella. The two of them walked over. She spoke first and asked, "What are you two doing?" Xiao Thursday awkwardly stepped back, while Heist coldly said, "Nothing. I was disciplining Xiao Thursday. She's been too lax lately, not focusing on her work and taking the rules too lightly." Xiao Thursday, who had just been caught slacking off, immediately echoed him. "Yes, I'll reflect on myself." At that moment, the bracelet Xiao Thursday was wearing suddenly slipped down. Then it unexpectedly started playing a sound, right in front of the three of them. It said, "Lovers on a date, a talented man, and a beautiful woman, shining brightly at Manson's fashion store. This is the most beautiful couple I have ever seen." The three of them looked at Xiao Thursday in confusion. The sound from the bracelet kept playing. Manson's fashion store will preserve the most beautiful moments in our customers' lives. Blushing and flustered, she hurriedly turned it off. She raised the arm wearing the bracelet, with tears practically streaming down her face, and said, "Sorry, I really didn't do it on purpose." Heist looked at the bracelet and said, "What do you mean by lovers on a date? Let me see it." At that moment, Cinderella could hardly believe her eyes either. So the candid photos from yesterday had been taken for advertising?